All right, so we are hello again. We are back now with the Glenmorangie. What is this called again? The special edition line.
This is the private edition.
Private edition.
And the idea here behind the private edition is to allow us to come out with an annual special release that is from a sort of more experimental cask stock, where we didn't necessarily lay down enough cask to produce enough whiskey in the future to have a permanent addition to the line right now, but that particular experimental cask batch that we did came out with some great whiskey, and we don't want to just waste it. We wanted to bring it out and let you guys taste it. So the private edition, last year we launched it really with the Sonnalta PX, one we're going to taste now. This year we have Glenmorangie Finealta, and watch this space, late January, early February 2012, there's going to be a new one. Can't tell you anything about it yet, but watch this space. It's fantastic and really exciting. Hope you're going to enjoy that. So one a year, it'll only be around for that year because there's not enough of these casks to go around. And as you can see, with the first one we're going to try, the Glenmorangie Sonnalta PX here, this was last year's, and it's the same sort of process as for the extra matured range. Roughly 10 years in American white oak, and then extra matured in a secondary cask for broadly 2 years here. And what we've used here is a very special type of sherry, Pedro Jimenez sherry. The Spanish describe it as the king of sherries. Very rarely actually bottled by itself for consumption because it's so rich, so pungent, so spicy. It's usually actually used as a component in cream sherry. The British penchant for cream sherry. You throw in a little dash of Pedro Jimenez, and it helps build a cream sherry. However, it is an amazing sherry in its own right, and the Spanish have managed to keep it for themselves pretty much. So we managed to pull off quite an interesting idea here. And we didn't just go and buy some used Pedro Jimenez casks, because basically Pedro Jimenez, they're not looking for much oak influence. They're looking for an oak vessel which allows the sherry to oxidize and mature in that respect without adding too many tannins or oak influence. So they use pretty tired, neutral oak at that point. The opposite of what Glenmorangie wants.
Sure.
So, to be able to pull this off, Dr. Lumsden actually had some of these big sherry casks commissioned with top quality Spanish oak. They were ours from day one, in a similar sort of way that we do with the American white oak casks here. He then had those casks shipped to a Pedro Jimenez producer and filled with Pedro Jimenez to be matured. Now, the Pedro Jimenez producers would be like shaking their heads in shame because they don't want a lot of oak influence in PX. But for us, by soaking these fantastic quality casks in PX sherry, it gave us the best of both worlds, the essence of the PX and the top quality cask, which we then, this was a great expense to us because we basically screwed up a bunch of PX sherry that couldn't be used for anything, so we had to eat that cost. Those casks then came to Scotland, soaked in this PX, and we transferred our Glenmorangie for 2 years into it. So, as I just said at the end of the last segment, the Glenmorangie Sonnalta PX is kind of like the La Santa on steroids. It's taking it to the next level. So let's have a nose at full strength. And straight away, you get that unctuous, rancio sherry note in there.
It is massive. I mean, it's much more of an attack.
And it's not just that sort of sherry. You get a real sense of the oak. There's a spicy oakiness in there. And I have to say, still some of the Glenmorangie, underlying Glenmorangie, a little bit there of that sort of orange note coming through,
easily,
the citrus, a little bit of the vanilla in the form of almost creme brulee underneath it all here.
Yeah, lightly toasted creme.
So let's have a little taste at full strength. Again, the private edition, non-chill filtered, 46% usually at least. So let's have a taste. Ooh, there's a spiciness to that.
Really spicy.
You get everything that the Santa has. It's like somebody's just turned the volume up a few notches, and then thrown in this lovely, spicy, invigorating finish to the single malt.
Yeah, like a tingly feeling down the sides of my tongue.
I mean, certainly you know, if any of you happen to enjoy a cigar with your single malt from time to time, you know, not necessarily the most healthy thing in the world to do, so not condoning it, but if you do, this is probably a great match.
Well, yeah, it's got enough of a bold character to maybe stand up to
really can,
the harshness
of. You know, the whole subject of cigars and single malts. It's interesting. Some people think it's a terrible thing to do to your single malt because no doubt you can't taste your single malt as well. I'm a little bit more enlightened. Yeah, you know, I think there's two ways to look at it. If you're going to sit down like this and really try and explore and get to know a single malt, there's no doubt a cigar is a silly thing to have alongside your single malt. However, on the deck, come back from work, summer evening, glass of single malt, cigar in one hand, glass of single malt in the other. It's a lovely experience. You know, if you like cigars, the two together can be a very nice experience.
You know, all I can say is from my experience, it's otherwise. But I've heard enough people mirror what you have said. So
and nobody's wrong. Horses for courses. If you enjoy it, you do. If not, that's fine. Don't let anyone bully you into doing it. Mm-hmm. You know, but you know, a lovely, but powerful and bold single malt here. Let's add a dash of water. Okay. See if we can tame the beast at all. A little bit here.
Now, how old is this one again?
It's there's no age statement on the bottle for this one, but it is genuinely a 12-year-old single malt.
Okay.
10 plus 2. I could go into a long and fairly boring story about how there ended up being no age statement on this label, but it's pretty boring. And but you know, if anyone really wanted to, we could pull up the paperwork that proved that it was a 12-year-old single malt.
Well, I think it gets back to what you were saying before, when a whiskey reaches a maturity.
Yeah.
There's some people who talk back and forth about issues of no age statement whiskeys and.
Yeah, and quite rightly so in some respects. You know, the industry has marketed both blended Scotch and single malts for, you know, a generation or two. Mm. So as long as anyone alive can remember, through this simple method of age statements, and now we're trying to change that, rightly so as well. And it's no surprise that people are a little unsure why the message is slightly changing. The message is actually changing, you know, because single malts are better than they've ever been, and we don't want to be just, you know, held by in a vice by this idea that we have to reach a certain age. You know, some of the very best single malts I've ever tasted out of casks at our own distilleries and some of our competitors have been around about 6 or 7 years old. I swear to you, fantastic. But it's really down to maturation. It's how mature that single malt is, and the quality of the cask. How many times that cask has been used. The more times it's been used, the less it's going to influence the whiskey. So you use a 10th fill cask for 20 years, you get very little influence on the whiskey. Use a first fill cask for 7 years, you arguably probably get more influence on the whiskey.
Yeah, that
so
makes sense.
Yeah, the age statements are one part of the puzzle, but you would never just go to Barnes & Noble or Borders and buy a book based on the front cover. I hope you would do a little bit more research into it than that. You know what I mean? So please just take the time to read a bit of the backstory on these labels. There's usually plenty of information on any one single malt these days, and that should give you a good idea. And come to some of the whiskey festivals. There's plenty of opportunities to taste through most of everybody's lineups and discover what you like.
Sure.
That's what I would recommend.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And the hope is that for people who unfortunately don't have that chance, something like this, the series that I'm doing for the blog may help those who can't. But if you do have an opportunity, you know, I urge anybody to go one of these, and not to get shit-faced drunk.
No, absolutely.
But, you know, if you're really interested in exploring some new stuff,
absolutely,
and listening to what, you know, if you're behind the table or someone else for, you know, another distillery, learn.
Yeah.